The Fitzy and Wippa with Kate Ritchie podcast.
Got a very special guest in the studio. He's a paediatrician, over 18 years experience in working with children in a number of settings. His clinical and research interests include child development, mental health, discipline, improving health literacy and promoting community engagement to support families. His name is Dr. Billy Garvey and he joins us now. Dr. Billy!
Welcome to the show. You know you're getting old when you realise that the people who are telling you what to do with your children are younger than you.
Dr. Billy, can I ask, because it seems to be almost, it's not a cop-out, but obviously there's a consistency there, where people will go, oh, yeah, little girls 3 to 4, they do that. Oh, little boys at the age of around 8, they go through this. You know, these sorts of labelling and age brackets that kids have, I don't like that because when I look at my little girl's behaviour, and she's 3, I don't like thinking that's just what happens. But at the moment, the kicking and the screaming and the not listening, like it's hurtful as a parent, where at the end of the day you sit back and think, why am I not connecting with her? Because she's not listening to me and therefore I start to feel distant and you feel like a bad parent. Fix all of that, Dr. Billy.
Yeah, great. Let's swing into that. So there's a reason for that, and that's just your child doesn't have the skills yet to know how to kind of get their needs met in a more successful way and communicate. So what we do is we guide them. We think about, cool, what's going on for her? And as hard as it is, and you often can't do this because you're stressed and you're like, I'm late to work, I've just made this amazing meal, and you're throwing it back at me or whatever.
Yes.
But trying to put yourself in their shoes is a really good move to be like, what might be going on for them?
But in going back to what you were saying, Wippa, do you think that most kids, that things can be categorised? Like there are developmental stages?
Yeah, there's stages they go through, and that can be really helpful in understanding that one of the biggest walls that parents hit is the expectation they have is too high. So if you're kind of like expecting a 3 or 4-year-old to understand your perspective, you're kidding yourself. Right. It's never going to happen. They haven't got to that stage in development yet. If you're expecting a primary school age kid to be able to kind of reflect on their emotions and things like that, you're well beyond their capacity.
The big one at the moment, we've got a 9-year-old and he's pushing the boundary with being a little bit of a smart ass. The other day he said to me, well, Mummy said to me, I've got to sleep over at Joel's house on Friday night. Well, remember the last time you're on the iPad for a long time? And he goes, yeah, and I'll probably do it again. And I just went, testing. But I said to him, I took a deep breath and I said, mate, you know what? You're being a bit disrespectful to Daddy at the moment and I feel really sad about it. And don't get me wrong, I don't react like that all the time. Sometimes I can raise my voice, but I don't want to be yelling at the kids all the time.
No, and you're not. It's important that sometimes you show them emotions, though. Don't kind of set a bar for yourself that I can never get angry, I better not yell, because then they grow up going, oh, it's bad if I do that.
Yes.
So you just got to make sure you role model the recovery as well. Yeah. That you're like, hey, I got really annoyed at you before. It's just because I'm stressed. I went for a run. I've come back and had a chance to realise about it. I wasn't thinking about your perspective. Hey, I know you're annoyed. I know you want the iPad, but... Yeah. And kids often need a hook. Kids are very kind of reward sensation seeking. So you're like, I'm going to help you with however much help you need for this, because in a month's time we're going to do this thing where we celebrate how amazing you're doing at reading, and we're going to build towards that.
Awesome.
And you kind of make a plan. Kids are like very purposefully, their role is to push against boundaries and test them.
I do have 2 questions for you. One real quick one that you might be able to answer. In schools these days, and I have this conversation within my family quite a lot, is there seems to be the habit of congratulating all of the children and giving everyone an award and everyone's a winner. Is there a black and white answer to whether that is right?
It's a really good question, actually. So I think there is a vulnerability in it of kind of like going, you're all kind of doing really well at this stuff, because there'll be kids that aren't. Yes. And the risk is we miss them and we go, geez, that kid's actually not reading that well, or that kid doesn't know how to control their emotions at the level they should be able to, but let's just celebrate everyone. And the kid just completely gets missed and all the other kids fly off and get better at stuff, whether it's, running or reading or whatever it is, and we miss them. Kids need to have some winning. Every kid needs to be winning at something. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's not a generic thing that you go, all of the class is amazing at everything. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Because we're not.
You got
we're
to work
actually
on.
not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it sets up this expectation, and sometimes those kids will come through and they'll be like, I've never been told I've done anything wrong. I've never been told I could have done something better. Yeah. And you become an adult and then you're like, hey,
can't fail.
Yeah.
Can't fail.
Just quickly then, the other question I wanted to ask you, and this is about, as a parent, sometimes you can get to a point and you can regret a lot of things that you've done and regret a lot of things that you haven't done. How do you turn that around as a parent and think, I can still have a fresh start You know, maybe I've been through some hard times, the family's been through a rocky road, or maybe there's been a divorce, or all of these things. How can I then make things better from here and not think,
stuff it, I've burnt the 7 years.
God, I've done those things. You know, how do you rebuild sometimes?
You can always recover. I see lots of families where they've kind of gone through child protection. Those families have spent time away from their parents for years. And I feel this huge privilege that I get to meet those parents trying to repair awful stuff that's happened, and they've gone through adversity and hardship where they haven't seen their kids and these awful things have happened, you can imagine. But you can always repair this stuff. I've never met a kid that I'm like, there's no hope. I'm really lucky I get to journey with them. But it goes back to the same stuff, Kate. If you're in that situation where you're a parent, you're listening and you're like, oh man, I'm listening to this stuff and I've got a teen and we're totally disconnected, then work on that. Be like, I need to work on this connection. I need to put effort into it. I always think it's interesting that we spend so much time like practicing our golf swing and we go, I want to get better at golf. I want to kind of work on it, drop my handicap, you know, spend all this money and time and at the range. We need to be a bit like that in parenting and not just be like, oh, I'll figure it out.
Yes.
Or I should be able to do this naturally. You've got to be purposeful.
Don't throw your hands up.
Yeah, don't throw your hands up and kind of go like, you know what I'm going to do is once a week I'm going to find something both of us enjoy and we're going to make sure that always happens regardless.
Dr. Billy, when we told everybody you were coming on the show, the phones lit up. We said, if anyone's got a question and needs Dr. Billy, give us a call right now. Daniela in Oyster Bay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have 4 twin children and I co-sleep with them. What's the best way to get them not to co-sleep with me anymore?
I have an 8.5-year-old and I'm still struggling to get her out of my bed.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, to be honest, Kate. We see heaps of families that come to us in clinic and they'll kind of cautiously go, they're sleeping in our bed.
Yeah, well, you feel embarrassed because everyone's talking about it and poo-pooing the idea of it.
But think about all the cultures in the world where they all do that. Everyone sleeps together in the same bed. And we just have this weird thing that we're like, it'll cause some psychological problem down the track if they never get out of my bed. I always ask, do you care? And at least half the parents say, no, not really. And I go, sweet. If they do care, they're like, I'm not getting any sleep, or it's really coming between the relationship with me and my partner or whatever. I'm like, cool. Then we work on it. The general consensus with a lot of this stuff, from bubs that are older than 6 months to the teens that are kind of still needing a lot of support, is you go to where they're at and then you try and stretch them a little bit. So say they're in your bed, you're like, sweet, we're going to start the night in your room and I'm going to be here. But what we're going to do is get this working well and then I'm going to stretch, and we just drop the intensity and duration of support that kids are requiring.
Right.
And you go, cool, the goal is I walk in, I say goodnight, you got your eyes awake, you're sitting up, you say goodnight, and I cruise back to my room and never see you again until the morning because you sleep well.
Yeah.
That's often 20 steps. That's not one step. A lot of people are like, what's the one thing that I need to do?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Just on social media, you've been a big advocate for exploring how social media can be used to support parenting. What are your thoughts on that? It can be a positive thing?
Yeah, I think so. It's also an inevitable thing. Like, there's no world that kind of, I see some families that are like, I want them to not be a part of that until they're 17, 18, and the kid gets socially isolated because all of his mates are using social media.
That leads obviously to the question I would assume you get asked the most about screens and iPads and games. How much is too much? Should I be limiting it? Should it be an hour a day?
Screens can be fine. So it's just the world has changed, and I'm always more interested in what can happen instead as opposed to cutting down screen time, because a lot of parents are like, I just want you to sit there and do stuff but not screen time, and it's like, actually, what can I go in and do with you, or what can I get you to do? And often we're trying to stop kids from doing stuff instead of getting them to do other things.
Yeah, they still need stimulation, don't they?
Yeah, totally.
We know how busy you are, mate, and like you said, it's like a 2-3 year waiting list just to get in to see Dr. Billy Garvey. You've also, if you want to hear more, you're the co-founder of the Pop Culture Parenting podcast as well. You do that every week?
Yeah, every week, and we've got an amazing community. We've had a lot of professionals come in, and we kind of get a lot of questions and read it out. And I reckon one of the best things we do on that is everyone hears that everyone else is also finding this a bit tough.
Yep.
So,
too true.
Dr. Billy Garvey, thank you very much for coming in.
No, thank you everyone for the opportunity. It's great.
Fitzy and Wippa with Kate Ritchie is a Nova podcast. For more great comedy shows like this, head to novapodcast.com.au.